And like I mentioned, he was murdered outside his New York City apartment in December of 1980 at the age of 40. So he produced 7 of his own albums from 1970 to 1980 and was murdered outside his New York City apartment in December of 1980 at the age of 40. George Harrison. He released a dozen solo albums after the breakup. A dozen solo albums after the breakup. He also got into the production of films. Started his own film company and produced several films. Prior to his death at the age of 58 of cancer in 2001. So George Harrison released a dozen solo albums and produced films through his film company he established before dying of cancer at the age of 58 in 2001. You have touched history here, kiddos. Get on eBay and see what one of those is worth. I got to get an original. You can't get a copy. Okay? Can't get a reproduction. Ringo Starr, still alive today. He has released nearly 24 albums. He's also appeared in about 24 films since the breakup. Released 24 albums, also appeared in about 24 films. Became a little bit of an actor. And he started his own band. You know what the name of it was, Morgan? Ringo Starr's All-Star, with 2 R's, band. His All-Star band. Pretty original, huh? He continues to tour with that band. Probably the most famous of the Beatles now, because of what's happened after the breakup, and the one that's had the most success has been Paul McCartney. He's become a very, very prolific solo artist. He formed a band after his breakup called Paul McCartney and the Wings with his first wife, Linda. He established a very successful band called Paul McCartney and the Wings. Mainly just went by the Wings. And he and his first wife, Linda, who passed away, formed that band. He continues to tour and record, very, very active still. And he's listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most successful musician-songwriter in history. He's wrote more songs than any man in history. So Paul McCartney, most prolific, especially as a solo artist. He did form a band with his late wife Linda called The Wings, and he continues to tour and record and is listed in the Guinness World Book of Records as the most successful musician-songwriter in history. Now we get done with this material, we have our little test. I'm going to treat you at that concert at Madison Square Garden of the 50th anniversary of the Beatles being on the Ed Sullivan Show, give you some history, and have you, some of the artists that you like, perform their songs. I think you will love it. Other classes that really like it. Okay, that'll take us to fashion in the 60s. Yeah, fashion. Ash jeans, baby, bell bottoms. Obviously, the fashions in the 1960s are going to be a lot different from those of previous decades. And you know what the most notable fashion statement in the 60s for women was? Patty? You'd get kicked out of school if you wore one of these. No? No? Mini skirt. Lenore Lawson, 7th grade, 1972. First thing I saw when I walked in, I went, oh my God, I'm going to like it. Anyway, one of the most famous miniskirt and models of the 1960s was Leslie Lawson, better known as Twiggy. Better known as Twiggy. She's a very young, popular model. Her name was Leslie Lawson. Received the nickname Twiggy, and she was the one that first introduced the miniskirt to people in America. Why did they call her Twiggy? Very skinny. Here's this is worth a little money too. Here's a Twiggy doll. They're worth a little money. Can't find them. They came out with all kinds of things. She was skinny. Was a new look among models. She was born in London, England in 1949. And she became what we know today as the world's first supermodel. And she was just 16 years old at the time. So she came from London, England, where she was born in 1949. And by the mid-60s, she became internationally known as the world's first supermodel at the age of 16. She later went into acting, was a very successful actress, kept her shape, so to speak, and modeled into her mid-50s. Modeled into her mid-50s. She became a successful actress, and her timeless beauty allowed her to model into her mid-50s. Now, what was the opposite of the miniskirt? Became popular in the 1960s. It's called the mini, what's the opposite of mini? Maxi skirt, which was a skirt that went down to the ankles. Now that was unusual, because where did most women wear their dresses prior to this? Right in here, like you kind of do now. So the mini skirt was a dramatic change here, and the maxi skirt all the way down. People were not used to that. It was worn down to a woman's ankles. You know what else became very popular for women? Knee-length boots. Katie Onstead. She had a comment about her last trip to D.C. I took Katie to D.C. when I was in Fort Benton about 1992, and she was into these knee-length boots, also known as go-go boots. She bought 4 pair at this women's store in downtown D.C., not too far from the White House, and we had to go to a post office and mail them back. She had an orange pair, a white pair, a black pair, and kind of a beige pair. She bought 4 pair. We still tease about that. She made a comment on our trip, and she said, anybody go buy any go-go boots? I said, no, but I think Maddie Dupree would have if she'd have known what they were. I should have got this lecture. Anyway, the person that made him most famous was Nancy Sinatra. Anybody heard that name Sinatra before? Frank Sinatra's daughter. She was a little bit of an aspiring actress, aspiring musician, and she wrote a song that kind of made these boots more popular. Anybody know what the song was called? These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. You give me enough time and I'll make these boots will walk all over you. And that became famous. There she is, Nancy Sinatra. Didn't really go too far. Her most famous thing was she was the daughter of Frank Sinatra. Well, this song kind of opened the doors for a new category of women in rock. Who's your tough girl, rebel chick that you can think of in rock? This one I can think of just got inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 2 years ago. Anybody know? Nobody knows. Crimson and Clover? Think on that a little bit. Huh? Pat Benatar's a good guess. She was more in the 80s. Yeah, Pat Benatar was pretty good. We'll save that for a little bit later. So Sinatra's tough girl attitude made her the first rebel chick performer. Now, this is a little weird, but I do have a picture of it, but I won't show you. One of the new fashions of the 1960s concerning women were topless bathing suits. I'll just show you a picture without the person in it. Topless bathing suits. Who were they developed by? Yeah. Who was it? Look, who was the guy? Rudy Gernwick. That's exactly right. Rudy Gernwick designed this special bathing suit. Let's see if I can find it here. Unfortunately for him, there was not, let's see here, there was not a lot of interest in them. As you can see by the look on this poor girl's face, this is what they look like. Right here. Oh. Whoops. What the hell? Anyway, this is how they fit. Yeah, there you go. Anyway, just telling you the story, kiddos. Just telling you the story. So, The suit was designed by Rudy Gernreich, actually Gernreich. It symbolized what people thought the sexual revolution was all about. Sales were slow on this attire. Very few women purchased them. Just the way it is. This is even a little grosser. I won't show you a picture because I don't have one, thank God. It even got as liberal to the point where some restaurants in the Midwestern part of the United States were featuring bottomless waitresses. So anyway, it got kind of crazy in the 1960s when it came to fashions. Let's get away from women for a minute and we'll concentrate on guys. What were 4 types of things that were big for men in the 1960s other than long hair? What was popular among fashions for men other than long hair?
Denim jackets.
Not so much. Bell-bottom trousers. Very good. Yeah, they were big. Bell-bottom trousers. And they later kind of metamorphosized into women wearing them too. But men started out with these bell-bottom shorts. And if you had a pair of hash jeans with a half a sun on the back pocket, you were paying big money. What else did men wear? Or what did they do? That would be a little unusual. These are starting to come back into style a little bit. Tight-waisted suits. You know, suits now kind of hang off you. In those days, you had a real tight-waisted suit, tight vest, sport coat. They're kind of making a little bit of a comeback. But tight-waisted suits were big. How about facial hair? What was the big thing on facial hair? What did men start to sport? Long sideburns. For lack of any art talent, I'll show you what I mean. So here's some fella here, here's his nose and his mouth and whatever. And he's got all this hair, and he's got this ear here. And they wore these lamb chop sideburns, kind of like that. Those were big. They were big. You ever, who had some kid was wearing them here one time. I don't remember. Had them just shaved perfectly.
Oh, is it?
Who? I think we're thinking. Who? Might have been. Yeah. Might have been. Anyway, another thing men started wearing were fur coats, which was really for women. Who was the first famous person ever to wear a fur coat? Nice big white one in public. Broadway Joe Namath, quarterback of the New York Jets. First male to sport a fur coat publicly was Joe Namath. He was a professional football quarterback for the New York Jets in the 1960s. Tell you a little story about Joe Namath. He was a playboy extraordinaire. He came out of Alabama, and he signed for $250,000 a year. Man, that was crazy, because the NFL and the AFL were 2 separate leagues at the time. They finally merged into what we know as the NFL today, but the AFL was this new league that sprung up that wanted to compete with the NFL. And so what were they competing for? Draft picks. They'd have an AFL draft and an NFL draft. And boy, these AFL teams wanted to sign some of these big-time players to get their league going. And Joe Namath had a big-time offer in the NFL, but he chose to go to the AFL because they're going to pay him $250,000 a year, which was unbelievable money at that time. So he helped establish the NFL, or the AFL. Well, the NFL and the AFL rivaled against each other for a period of time, and then they decided, well, let's really see who's the best. We'll have a World Championship game. And who was the first teams to play in the World Championship? It wasn't called the Super Bowl. It was called the World Championship Game 1. Anybody know the history of this? Who played in the first World Championship game between NFL and AFL? Green Bay and Kansas City. Very good. And Green Bay beat the hell out of them, and Vince Lombardi became a legend. And so they decided they would try it again. They had a World Championship Game 2 the next year. Who played that? Green Bay Packers and the Oakland Raiders. And Green Bay won big again. And this AFL thought, man, we might have to fold here. This is getting bad. We'll try it one more time. Well, between the second World Championship game and the third World Championship game, Lamar Hunt, who was the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, was eating breakfast one day. And his son was sitting there bouncing this ball all around, driving him nuts. It was bouncing all over the place. It was a highly compressed ball. You might call him a bouncy ball in your life. And he got tired of that kid bouncing that ball and finally grabbed it, took it away from him. He looked on it, and what did it say on the ball? Super Ball. That's what they were. They were famous back in the 60s. I have one still in the package, never been opened. Super Bowl. And Lamar Hunt looked at that and he said, Super Bowl, Super Bowl. And the third World Championship game became known as Super Bowl III, although it really wasn't a Super Bowl. You've seen it before. Who played in that? Other than the Olympic hockey team in 1980 defeating the Russians in the semifinals of the Olympics, this might be the biggest upset in sports history when these two teams played. And who played in Super Bowl III? Obviously, it had to be the guy we're talking about, right? Joe Namath and the Jets. Who'd they play against? The Baltimore Colts. Baltimore Colts were 16-point favorites in this Super Bowl. I mean, I'm telling you, this was going to be a butt kicking. And reporters are going around Joe Namath, and he stands up at the pool. He's got all kinds of women around him. He's got the sideburns. He's looking good. He's kind of a playboy. And he says, somebody says, you think you have a chance against the Baltimore Colts this weekend? He said, a chance? We're going to beat them. I guarantee it. And then all of a sudden, the guarantee was out. And oh boy, Joe Namath is going to get his butt handed to him in the Super Bowl. I'll be darned if the Jets don't beat him 16-7 and upset the mighty 15-1 Baltimore Colts in the Super Bowl. Well, they played the next year, and the AFL Kansas City Chiefs whipped the NFL Minnesota Vikings, and it was 2 Super Bowls apiece. And what resulted in that, Morgan? The merger, the AFL-NFL merger. The AFL teams became the AFC, the NFL teams became the NFC, with the exception of Pittsburgh and Cleveland, who went to the AFC side to even it up. And we have the NFL as we do today. And how many Super Bowls do we have? 51. What's that? We have the Eagles. 51. Super, I think it's 52, isn't it? Yeah, 2, because Denver won 50, and then... Yeah. So anyway, that's a little bit more than you needed. But the point being is that Joe Namath became a famous football player by winning really 1 Super Bowl. He struggled after that, had knee problems. But he was the man. I mean, he was the most eligible bachelor in the United States of America and played it to the hilt. First one ever to wear a fur coat. One more story about it. What do athletes get involved in for a lot of money? Commercials. He grew a mustache. He grew a mustache. They paid him $10,000 in those days to cut off his mustache. Guess who cut it off for him? Well, it was in the commercial lathering him up while he shaved off. Farrah Fawcett. You ever heard of her? Look her up. The most beautiful woman in the history of mankind. Anyway, that's not the end of it. His biggest payday came when he wore a pair of women's pantyhose on commercial. And got, I don't know how much money, but he comes out in his green shorts and his jersey, and he's got women's pantyhose, and he tells how comfortable they are. And I don't remember how much he made, but he was the guy that was making all the money at the time. All right, here's where we're at here. We are going to talk about America's first sex goddess, Marilyn Monroe, tomorrow. That will be Tuesday. We'll probably have, as we finish up, our next test and last test will be open note. And we'll have that either Wednesday or Thursday. What's the schedule looking like for this week, Thursday? Because we're talking about that's our birthday party day? Is that what we're saying? Or is that next week? Okay, what do we got going this Thursday for activities? Okay, how about track? Okay, we're probably going to have an open note test on Thursday, and then what are we going to do after that? We're going to have a, well, after, what are we going to do? We're going to watch that 50th thing on the Beatles. And those of you that take your AP test, we probably just will go without you, and we'll finish up as we go by. It's about 2 hours long, but it's very good. So, well, I don't think we're going to get to Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump would wrap things up pretty good for us.